Ah.
Oh, battling bishops. Here we go. I got 559. Everybody put their phone on silent, please. Just did mine. Gary, you guys okay? What? I heard something. We're good. It's golden. It's good. You got it quick. We got host characters up here. Cheryl. I'll wait for y'all to tell me when we're legal. I think we might be close. 6 official clock. You show 6 o'clock?
Good old paper.
Council, are y'all ready? Y'all ready, Council?
Always ready.
Let me call to order the Tuesday, February 12th meeting of Mount Pleasant Town Council. Good evening. It's good to see everybody here on this nice February night. We will begin with the prayer led by our own Rabbi Revson, and then we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask the Cub Scout Troop 20 from Mount Pleasant Presbyterian Church to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand.
Almighty God, source of all blessing, source of all comfort, source of all wisdom, source of all understanding, we beseech you in abundant mercy to bestow your blessings upon all of the citizens of this wonderful town. We also ask that you bless our mayor, town council, men and women of law enforcement, department heads, and all of our civil servants. For doesn't it teach us in your tradition that when one of your children reaches beyond the world of his or her own needs or wants to help alleviate the suffering, the pain, the discomfort of another person, this very act opens the doors to your bountiful blessings and the gates of your kingdom. For these blessings we pray in your name. Amen.
Amen. Would y'all like to lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes, sir.
On your cue.
United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Should have brought him up here front.
Item number 3 is compliance with Freedom of Information Act. Mr. Pagliarini, are we in compliance?
Yes, Mayor, we're in compliance.
Thank you very much. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to move new business 4 and 5 up on the agenda to an appropriate place earlier in the meeting for the sake of people who showed up to discuss those items.
Okay, are you suggesting we move those up to become items 8, 1 and 2 before planning?
Perfect.
Second.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion, we have a second. Second. Any discussion? All right, all in favor of moving under council new business, which would be items 11, A4, and A5 to become the new item 8 before planning, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Let me make note of that.
11 what? 11A4. Four and 5.
All right, so is there a motion that we approve the amended agenda?
Move to approve.
We have a motion. We have a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approval of the amended agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we now have an amended agenda. Item number 5 is public hearings, awards, and presentations, and we will begin with item A, the portrait unveiling of Mayor Linda Page. If y'all would please join me around the front.
Ask him.
So, certainly no stranger to any of us, Mayor Linda Page served as Mount Pleasant Town Council member from 2009 to 2013, before serving as Mount Pleasant mayor from 2013 to 2017, while running a successful local business. When she was elected to Town Council in 2009, she funded her own campaign, spent very little money, and yet received the most votes in a crowded candidate field. Throughout her career as a Mount Pleasant elected official, Linda encouraged citizen engagement and served with a passion for her community. Mayor Page was at the helm when the new state-of-the-art town hall was built and officially opened. This evening, I'm pleased to assist with the unveiling of her portrait, which will hang alongside those of our previous mayors, including Mayor Cheryl Woods Flowers. And Mayor Page, we thank you for your 8 years of selfless service to our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So he said I could talk now or we can do this later, but I think, you know, like most women, we don't really like to have our picture taken, much less something that will be perpetual. Cheryl Woods Flowers. So really, it's just an honor for me to be here. This isn't about me, this is about service. And I was blessed to grow up in the most awesome town in South Carolina. And it's my town, our town. So I get emotional when I talk about it because it's so special. But here's the celebration and here's the joy. It's not about being mayor. Will knows it is the hardest part-time job in the United States. Is that your quote? Yes, I believe that was his quote. But I would have to second it, and I know Cheryl Woods Flower would as well. So here's what makes this work. My family, my friends, and what I really would like to do is have Cheryl and the council that I serve with stand up. Just go ahead, stand up. Because you don't do it alone. No mayor ever stands alone. The mayor stands with these hardworking people, and they're the ones who do the time away from their family. They're the ones that make the commitment to community. So first off, I'd like y'all to give them a hand. Thank you. Second, I'd like to have our Waterworks Commissioner stand up, Susan. And then there's another group that makes this happen. I think most people live in a community as great as the town of Mount Pleasant, and they just don't realize. They don't realize what it takes to make this work. They expect the trash to be picked up. They expect the fire department to come when they're called. They expect the police to be there when they're needed. They expect their child to have the best recreation programs. And they do all of this kind of unconsciously. They live in a great place and it all just happens. But there's someone else that makes it happen. And I can tell you, when I put the hat on as a town council member and then as mayor, it was these guys over here, this great staff, Eric, the lawyers. That's who make it all tick, guys. So please give them a hand too. And with no further ado, I think we're just going to rip this off and let y'all look at it, and then I think we're going to dinner. So. Okay, certainly. Okay. I don't know, Martine, is there a proper way? Just over the top? All right, there we go. my guys. I miss Thomasina, but this
Yeah, where's Thomasina?
over here? I don't know. Thomasina's here with us in Hartford. This is the A team. Thank you. Y'all have a great meeting. You doing all right? Good. Happy. I'm good.
They already knew.
Bob, I should have gotten you up there in my picture. Joe, you should have been in it as well. Thank you very much. Happy. Thank you. All right.
Are we done with that?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so we can go back to our...
It looks good. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
You coming out?
Something.
Yeah, we don't have any.
I thought we did. We did.
They said we were done.
Well done, sir.
Get to see it. Maybe it'll be on the lobby or something. Maybe on the wall and shit.
Wait over there.
I'll just say, I don't see any space left for the next marriage portrait, so whoever that
We didn't tell you about that yet.
goes out front. Jeff. All right. So this moves us to item 5B. We have a series of public hearings. Each one of these is a separate hearing in itself, and you know that that hearing is ended when you hear the gavel on that particular one. It does not mean council is done for the night, so don't get up and go eat. Mr. Oma?
Thank you, Mayor.
Microphone.
Good evening, council. First public hearing is a proposal to amend our comprehensive plan by changing the land use designation from its current community conservation to commercial at 1713 Halls Pond Road. The property is about a little less than half an acre. The owner is requesting this, associated with this are an annexation and a zoning request that follow later on your agenda. Next one, Martine. Here's the location of the property, Halls Pond Road, between Hungry Neck and US 17. And the land use plan and designations, as we mentioned, are community conservation with a request to change it to commercial. And then the annexation and the location here just outside the town limits, the gold colored properties are zoned AB. Turn it back to you, Mayor, for the public hearing.
Thank you. Is there anyone here who would like to address this item in this public hearing? Yes, sir. Please come to the microphone, state your name, address, in 2 minutes, please.
Tim Goodrich, 104 Bill Park Drive, Somerville. I'm here on behalf of the owners of 1713 Halls Pond. I just wanted to make a couple statements in regards to it. We addressed some concerns and some questions in planning, and I just wanted to go over those really quickly if I could. I appreciate the time. We don't have any plans for any intense commercial usage of the property. There's very limited disturbance to the area. Our business activity is generally limited to just a few hours a day at most. There would be no increased traffic flow. We do not operate a retail operation. There's no customers that come to our location, and we have been operating for 8 years at that location. The zoning request, I believe, is consistent with the neighboring properties that have already been welcomed into the town, the Children's Discovery Center, St. Pierre Construction, Contractor Nail and Tool, Nash Orthodontics. We are also supported in our application by the residential neighbors on the road. There are two currently, the Rowells and the Myers. They both have offered their support. And additionally, another question was the road itself, I believe, is considered a private egress. It's a dirt road. We are finalizing an operating and maintenance agreement with the current owner, who is Paul Myers, one of those residential neighbors I spoke of. Additionally, we are in talks with Mr. Myers to purchase the road from Venning to our property line. There was an additional concern with planning, as this area was considered a preservation of settlement community. The only structure on the road that predates the year 2000 has already been annexed into the town with the commercial designation, and additionally, the two families on the road have lived there for 20 and 9 years respectively with no family history or lineage in that area. 1 second. That was good.
Thank you. Good job. Good job. Thank you very much. Anyone else here to address this item in this public hearing? All right, hearing none, this public hearing, which is item 5B, is now closed. Item 5C, another public hearing. Marcy Kotal.
Yes, sir. Good evening. This is a public hearing on a new proposed fee related to administrative review of small wireless facilities pursuant to Section 6-1-330 of the South Carolina Code of Laws. The proposed application processing cost is $100 for each of the first 5 and $50 for each additional small wireless facilities up to a maximum of 20.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here to speak to this item in this public hearing? Going once, going twice? All right, no one here to speak. I will declare this public hearing closed. Item number 5D is another public hearing and the same.
Yes, sir.
Marcy Kotal.
This is a public hearing on the proposed amendments to the fiscal year 2019 budget pursuant to Section 6-1-80 of the South Carolina Code of Laws. The proposed budget amendment is in the amount of $4,297,516 and increases the town's fiscal year 2019 budget to $162,389,234.
Thank you very much. Anyone here to address this public hearing item? None? All right, I will declare this public hearing also closed. Thank you very much. This brings us to item E, Longevity Awards.
Yes, sir. If once again you'll join me out front, please.
All right. Kevin Nesbitt, would you please come forward? How you doing? Please stand on my left side for me, Kevin. Appreciate it. Thank you. Right. Come right here, Kevin. You can turn around and face them, please. Good to go. I'm ordering a big guy around. He may take advantage of it. It's my pleasure to recognize Kevin Nesbitt for 20 years of service with the town of Mount Pleasant. Kevin started his employment with the town as a laborer for our grounds division in February of 1999. In 2005, he was promoted to a crew leader, and in 2016, he became one of our park maintenance supervisors for grounds division. He is currently responsible for one of the town's largest and most used facilities, and that's Park West. Kevin has always been a reliable, dependable employee who's received countless thank you letters from residents and town officials. Kevin is a wonderful team player and has great knowledge of all operations within the grounds division. Kevin is also a part of our duty man team, which are employees who work standby for any type of storm or rain event throughout the town, outside normal working hours, and our first responders whenever an issue may arise, such as flooding or trees down in roadways. Kevin, thank you for everything you do, and congratulations for 20 years of service.
All right, Mayor, the next Mayor and Council, the next presentation is an award presentation, And as you know, staff in Planning and Development Department have the opportunity and pleasure to work with several boards and commissions, and one of those is the Historical Commission. Miss Kate Dolan is one of our newer planners, and Kate serves as the liaison to the Historical Commission. And I would invite the members of the Historical Commission who are here to come up and join us as Kate and Mr. DeMora make this presentation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Haney and Town Council. I'm Kate Dolan, as Mr. almost said. With me are the representatives from the Historical Commission. Mr. Gutowski is the chairman, Lonnie Doles Jr., and Miss Alicia Davenport. We also have with us a former member, Bob McDonnell. Mount Pleasant Historical Commission first established the Cresco Historical Stewardship Award in 2016 to recognize an individual, group, or organization for an exceptional accomplishment in preserving the physical and/or cultural heritage of Mount Pleasant. It's my pleasure to announce that the Historical Commission has selected the Alhambra Garden Club as the 2018 recipient for its work in preserving and protecting over the past 47 years Pageant's Post Office for the first freestanding post office. Now we would like to invite the Alhambra Garden Club up with us. Here to accept the award is Mrs. Minnie Mayberry, chairperson of the Alhambra Garden Club. And now Mr. DeMora will read the proclamation.
I'll go ahead and read this proclamation on behalf of Mayor Haney. Whereas the Mount Pleasant Historical Commission is charged with promoting the preservation, understanding, and appreciation of the town's physical and cultural heritage. And whereas the Mount Pleasant Historical Commission has created the Cresco Historical Stewardship Award, recognizing an individual, organization, or group that has done exemplary work in preserving, studying, restoring, or promoting the history of Mount Pleasant. And whereas the Alhambra Garden Club, currently made up of 32 members, has held organizational meetings in homes since 1955. Since 1971, the Alhambra Garden Club has owned, maintained, and promoted Pageant's Post Office. That was the first freestanding post office in Mount Pleasant from 1899 to 1917, and currently houses original contents including a desk, stamp machine, and typewriter, as well as old photos and a letter from President Woodrow Wilson appointing Mr. Pageant as postmaster. In 2001, the Alhambra Garden Club restored the post office building and became a part of the Historical Commission's Historical Marker Program. Whereas the Alhambra Garden Club's contributions to physical heritage through Pageant's Post Office exemplify the purpose of the Mount Pleasant Cresco Historical Stewardship Award. Now therefore I, Will Haney, Mayor of the Town of Mount Pleasant, on behalf of Mount Pleasant Historical Commission, am honored to present on this day, February 12, 2019, the annual Cresco Historical Stewardship Award to Alhambra Garden Club.
Say a few words, please. Well, we are honored and blessed to live in such a lovely town and to have been a part of it. In 1955, when Alhambra Garden Club started, we took on a project down on Middle Street in the Old Village. We were going to restore Alhambra Park. It took us 18 years, but everything that you see down there, from the azaleas to the trees to the park equipment, everything was part of our plan. And we went on to do some other things that we hope have set a precedent in the town. We built and maintained and planted the first planted islands on Coleman Boulevard, one in front of Royal Hardware and the one down as you come into the village. And I will stop when I tell you one more story about the post office. And in 1971, that little one room had been moved from Mr. Patchen's front yard on Church Street over to the corner of Hibbin and Weldon Street. And a contractor in town and a restorer named Harry Hatopoulos wanted to use that piece of property to move an old house to and to create that little circle that's called Patchen's Lane. So Harry talked to the town, and the town said yes, that it could be moved. And so it was loaded on a flatbed truck and moved down to now what is James B. Edwards Park on Pitt Street, Bank, and Ferry on the other side of it. And that's where it sits. Harry restored it. The News and Courier and the Moultrie News came to visit the day that it was moved. And we happened, and the whole neighborhood went. And we've had a lot of funny things happen. But I think the most interesting was we got all this publicity, and it came out in the News and Courier with all the pictures of the post office being rolled down the street. This farmer who lived down in Meggett called the town and said, this garden club that's taken on this one-room place, is there any way you could tell us to get in touch with them? And the town said, of course. And so the president then got a phone call. And the farmer said, I've got the inside of your post office in my barn. If you would like it, and you can get it moved to Mount Pleasant, you can have it. So, of course, we went to see Harry, and Harry said, oh, we'd love to do it. And so that's the entire wooden inside with all of the mailboxes, all of that came through the generosity of this one man. Thank you very, very much. And I would like to introduce you to some of our membership. We have polished, we have planted, we have pruned, and if it wasn't for Mr. Jody Peel and his group down there that gave us so much support on the grounds of James B. Edwards Park, it would look differently, and I hope it's here for a long time. Thank you. Our president is in South America.
Nice that way.
Okay.
Stay there, stay there, stay there. I need to present this. You want to? We're going to turn this way.
Okay.
And I'll give you the, that's good. Oh. These glue.
Yes. Okay. Oh. I'll just hold it. Oh, that's all there. We will put it on in the post office.
Okay.
And display it. Yeah, okay. Oh, thank you all so much. So nice to meet you. An open house. Oh, see it.
Meeting shorter.
He's getting an award. One more award needs to be given. I'll tell you what.
A bunch of.
While our recipients are making their way to the door, we will move on to item number 6, which is approval of the minutes from the January 8, 2019 Town Council meeting and the January 2019 financial statement. And having read the minutes, I guess I have to make a motion to amend or correct the January 8 Town Council meeting minutes where I'm given the Patriots Point Development Authority report. It says I missed that meeting on December 7th. I was at that meeting, but it was the following Tuesday that I was diagnosed with bronchitis, so I missed this meeting, which was Town Council meeting. Since there's a record of both of those, I didn't want there to be a conflict, so I have to move that there be that amendment to the minutes. Any other amendments to the minutes?
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So the amendment is made now. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So move.
Aye.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve the minutes as amended, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So we have the minutes, amended minutes approved. This moves us to item 7, correspondence and public statements. So I'll turn over to Mr. DeMora.
First speaker, Melissa Moore.
We need name and address, and we have the timer running. You will hear the ding when it's time to stop. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Melissa Moore. I'm with Housing for All Mount Pleasant, 708 Harbor Lane. First of all, I want to thank you for the seed funds you invested in Housing for All last year, which allowed us to retain a director of operations, which is actually my title, a director of development, and to spearhead our efforts. I just wanted to communicate some of the successes that we've had since last year. The nonprofit is 3 months old. I am exactly 1 month into the job, and we're already in the early stages of organizing an attainable housing partnership with a developer and a builder that will produce homes at well below market rate. And it's completely tied to our attainable housing goals. The details of the partnership and how the program would work are still being developed. We would ideally like to see a project underway in 2020. And we're also in conversations with another developer about a potential second housing development project. Housing for All only received our IRS designation in November of last year, so I think we've really done a lot in a very short amount of time. And then this early step has allowed us to develop the program and strategic plan, pursue partnerships, and establish a viable operation for the long term. We've partnered with local groups, including DonateToIt.com, which allowed us to raise $4,230, and donations are now possible through our website at housingforallmountp.com. And the money from last year lays the foundation that has gotten us to this point and will take us all the way where we want to go. And if anyone is interested in finding out more or getting involved in our efforts, I have a sign-up sheet over here, and I'll be sitting up front. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa.
Walter Brown III.
Good evening, council members. My name is Walter Brown III. I reside at 437 Benning Street. I come before you to represent 160 citizens, business owners, and Mount Pleasant Waterworks customers who have expressed an interest to restore the water tower under its current use. We believe this recommendation is the most cost-effective solution to a monopole construction with no interruption in cell service. I passed some correspondence to you. If you'd like to go to the last page, I'd just like to mention one number, $475,000. There's $600,000 on the table for demolition as well as the construction of a new monopole. That leaves a balance of $125,000, which is definitely a cost savings. A few points of interest. 4 to 6 months restoration time frame, and this information has been compiled from 6 companies, 2 of which are listed on the information that I submitted to you. The lattice ironwork is iron from World War I, some of the best steel ever made in America. We also have a new coatings technology, which is like vinyl siding, which could seal the tank to prevent further corrosion. During a hurricane, the utilities and first responders utilize satellite phones and radios. They do not use cell phones. Lastly, FirstNet, which has been spoken about a lot. FirstNet is a technology that is already available with the antennas that are currently on the tower. This information has been compiled from the Isles of Palms Waterworks Department, Charleston Water Systems, Folly Beach, contractors from the United States all the way to Hawara, New Zealand, as well as the Charlotte Police Department. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. Thank you very much for your service, and good evening.
Thank you.
David Shimp.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I attended the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago.
Can we get your address?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Dave Shemp, 1551 Ben Sawyer Boulevard. At the Planning Commission 2 weeks ago, I came to hear the agenda item regarding the revised comprehensive plan. I anticipate you'll be receiving the formal report in a month or two, but I wanted to pass on some observations before you do. Discussion of the draft seemed to me to be a really big group hug for the Planning Commission with our Cracker Jack consultants and the Citizens Advisory Group. I just didn't sense that any of them really appreciated the underlying message of the last 2 town elections. That message was about responsible development, of course, but more fundamentally was about sequencing. It was about infrastructure before development. The 400-plus pages of the draft comprehensive plan are largely about how to develop, not about protecting the town from overdevelopment. I doubt the thoughts I provided the Planning Commission gained any traction, so I ask that you consider inserting a preamble when the draft gets to you, a citizen's Bill of Rights, if you will. This fundamental overarching stipulation would require that infrastructure be in place before development occurs. In place, not only a promise, such as Chapter 4 of the draft, that contains a whole lot of hopes and dreams for adequate mobility and transportation sometime in the future. Even though some aspects of infrastructure are beyond the town's control, if the town doesn't have adequate roads, if the town doesn't have adequate water, if the town doesn't have adequate schools, and so on, then you don't pass go and you don't collect a permit. This would require development to be a part of the solution and would cause developers to use their influence to make sure sufficient infrastructure is in place before they burden the town with the impact of overdevelopment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa Turansky.
Hi, good evening. I'm Lisa Turansky, 1065 Groves Manor Court. I passed out a lot of paper to you this evening about the half-cent sales tax, and I wanted everyone here, both on council and people attending tonight, to know that Charleston County Council is considering right now, as we speak, using $3 million of the half-cent sales tax that passed in 2016 on a project that was not listed in the ordinance to be funded by the sales tax. Not only am I concerned about this, and the Coastal Conservation League is concerned about this, but I just have about 40 emails in my inbox of residents who are concerned about this. And I was going to come up here and use my talking points, but then I got this fabulous email, and I'm just going to read it real quickly. I won't name the person because I don't have their consent. But my wife and I agree that Charleston County is going rogue with our tax dollars when they are arbitrarily moving money from a tax fund to a project that was not approved by an ordinance, and it sets a dangerous precedent. Many of you know that Highway 41, all of you know, but many of you know, Highway 41 was one of those projects listed in the half-cent sales tax, but there are other projects. There's rural road funding, there's resurfacing, there are annual allocations. I mean, all of this money, CARTA, transit, all of this money is at risk because the projects that were in the ordinance add up to $2.1 billion, which is what the tax is for. The math is in front of you. I put my business card on there because I want you to reach out to me. I'll be reaching out to y'all to get to know those of you who I don't know well and to check in with those of you who I do. But we want to be a resource, and we're scared about the precedent that this sets with Charleston County. So thank you for your work on this, and I look forward to supporting y'all and showing leadership.
Did everyone get one of these?
Yeah.
Did you
everyone
have
up
one?
here.
Okay, so everyone's got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Pat Sullivan.
No, I got mine.
Good evening. Pat Sullivan, 1002 Plantation Court. And I want to talk about affordable housing. It's something we discussed a lot in the Comprehensive Plan Committee that I was on. And there were a couple of items that we decided were important enough that as we were wrapping up, we wanted the whole committee to discuss them and get everything out. And I honestly was flabbergasted at almost the whole room. Everyone was saying, we really need affordable housing. It is a huge thing for our town. And the comment was made, well, there was a task force, and the task force is now turned into a nonprofit. So the town isn't in it anymore. And that turned into another conversation, which was, well, we want the town to be very proactive in making available affordable housing. So that's what I want to let y'all know. I know they discussed it at the Finance Committee meeting. I'm not going to say what your decision was, but I would really like to see the town proactively involved in making affordable housing available for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Kristen White.
Name and address, please.
Good evening. My name is Kristen White. I'm at 312 Bridgetown Pass. This is off of the Long Point Road corridor, and our neighborhoods have the unique opportunity that our students will be able to ride bikes and walk to the new Lucy Beckham High School. It will be completed in the fall of 2020. We're asking simply for Mayor Haney and this town council to please help us ensure safety measures to be put in place for those high school students. We want safe pedestrian and bike access to the high school. It's on the former campus of Wando, so of course there have been students walking and biking in the past, but just as time goes on, we're looking for things like crosswalks to be improved or added as needed, traffic patterns to be considered, signals just to be adjusted to best help our students, and even a special entrance that is separate from where you'll have student drivers turning in. We would like that wasn't made available at the last meeting with Charleston County. It just hadn't been planned for yet, so we would love for that to be part of the plans ultimately. This would be for the Whipple Road, Mathis Ferry, and Long Point areas. Again, we're unique in our proximity to that school and the opportunity for our kids. And we're grateful for your communication with the District 2 School Board as they go through this zoning process. And we would love just to know that the safety measures taken are being conveyed to them so that they know it is a very viable option for our students to get to school. And I think it's a win-win for everyone in town when we can take vehicles off the roads. Thank you for your interest and involvement, and we're very, very hopeful for this really unique and special opportunity for our high schoolers to ride their bike to school. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have written, sir. Anyone else? Yes. Name, address, and 2 minutes, please.
I'll be as quick as I can be. George Freeman, 1450 Bowman Road, Director of Community Activities for CAGE. Mr. Jefferson is handing out a map to you. I spoke before the Transportation Committee about the Gregory-Freggery Highway 17 connection. Right now, while we're looking at Highway 41 and different options with 41, I'm here to speak on behalf of the CAGE organization that we would prefer if you would look at, instead of making the Gregory Ferry Road connection to 17 a 2-lane road, that you make it a 4-lane road where it would become the new 41 connection, whereas traffic would have a greater access to Billy Swales Boulevard. When the Hungry Neck Boulevard was first conceived, the purpose for it was to relieve traffic off of Highway 17. When the connection, the two-lane connection was made suggested from Gregory Ferry to 41 to 17, the reason for it was to get traffic to the Billy Swales Boulevard. Making this the new 41 would ensure that that traffic would take that route and provide another access for traffic off of Highway 17. That's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
William Hamilton, 32 Soul Street, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, Executive Director, Best Friends of Public Transit. I come to you to advise the town that your leadership has been heard and seen across the state. Your decision years ago to begin requiring developers to build bus stops is now reflected in a proposed piece of legislation to make that possible across the entire state of South Carolina. Your leadership was this very morning admired in the town of Somerville, where they said, wow, Mount Pleasant has everything. There are also 4 other bills pending. One of them is for transit-oriented development, which may or may not be available here, but perhaps in the future, and this will make it possible to create affordable housing. There are affordable housing units in Lincolnville, South Carolina right now for elderly people sitting empty because it's simply impossible for those people to live there because there's no transit anywhere nearby to take them to the grocery store or the doctor. We have places people be living now, we have people living under bridges because there's no way that they can connect to anything else but where they live. These 5 bills will improve that. I encourage everyone here present to contact their representative, ask them to sign on as a co-sponsor. A lot of the ideas behind these bills originated in this town. Second, I would like to warn everyone present in this room of the enormous hazard of what is happening in County Council tonight. It would be exceptionally easy to create a contract with the state of South Carolina, which obligates generally all of the financial capacity of county government to the construction of 526. When those inevitable cost overruns appear, they will turn around and go, too bad, so sad, we have to take the transit money, or we have to take the money for Highway 41. We cannot allow a bottomless pit to be plugged into the money to build the road this town wants and the transit this region needs. We contribute 40% of the sales tax in this county, and we should not be set up to be robbed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Good evening. I'm Louis Jefferson. I reside at 1128 McKnight Road in Mount Pleasant. I'm currently the Vice President of CAGE. Mr. Freeman is passing out a document that you should be familiar with. There are 9 concerns that we have within the overlay district and the settlement communities, and I just want to highlight one. Needless to say, they all are critical to us, but we are asking if you would consider a cease and desist on issuing permits for ADUs in the settlement community until such time the comprehensive plan is completed, and perhaps we'll go forth at that time. Appreciate you very much. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you, Louis. Next.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Catherine Main, 1968 Oak Tree Lane. But more importantly, I'm the Executive Director of the East Cooper Land Trust. And we are a community-supported organization to protect the natural, scenic, and cultural assets that we have in our community. And on behalf of the East Cooper Land Trust, we have received a lot of information from people very concerned about the seafood industry and the character that that has in our community, and we are working really hard to protect that. Some of you actually had some of those same goals, I know, as in your campaigns for council, and so I do hope that you'll listen tonight to me and the points that I have to make seriously, because the seafood industry is really being threatened in Shem Creek. Several months ago, I guess we have started looking at one of the properties, the Wanda Dock property, and Unfortunately, last week we lost an opportunity to get almost $1 million that could have gone towards the protection of that property. That was funding from the South Carolina Conservation Bank, and it will be several years before that funding opportunity is going to be available to us again. Fortunately, we still have a chance to get funding through the Charleston County Greenbelt program, but I need the town's permission in order to apply for that funding. Just because we apply doesn't mean we have to use the money. We can always turn it down, but we can't get the money if we don't get our application in. I understand, though, that the Wando Dock project is very complicated, so I have a fallback plan. I've also been working with the landowner of the Geechee Dock, and he is very willing to work with us on a protected conservation easement. This would not cost anything to the town of Mount Pleasant. It would just be if you allow us to apply for the Greenbelt funding. And so I ask y'all to please consider giving us that opportunity to apply. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
And that application is due, I would need an answer by February 22nd, which is only 10 days from now. So.
Thank you. Next? Yes. How you doing?
Good evening.
Good.
My name is Stephanie Kelly. I live at 1536 Privateer Drive, and I'm here tonight as a concerned citizen. I agree with the Somerville Council's mindset that we have everything in Mount Pleasant. We also have poverty, and we do not have affordable housing to help those individuals. So I'm here tonight as the Executive Director for East Cooper Community Outreach. And if you do not know about ECHO, we are now in our 30th year of providing services to families in financial distress. Services that include basic needs of food, clothing, and financial assistance. Health services that include free medical and dental care, and empowerment programs that help people gain the knowledge and the skills that they need to become financially stable. During our last fiscal year, we served over 2,000 households with all of these different programs. We are helping people who have grown up in generational poverty, and we are seeing more and more people who are experiencing situational poverty. Our staff and our volunteers are proud of all the services that we offer in-house, but we also have dozens of partnerships with agencies where we can send people when they have problems that we can help solve. But by far, the #1 problem for which there is no local resource in order to help our neighbors in need is the issue of housing. I can assure you that the lack of attainable and affordable housing in this community is a deterrent for our working families who are trying to reach a state of financial stability. We have clients who are living in their cars so their children can continue to attend the same schools after a divorce, a death of a primary breadwinner, or a sudden job loss. We have senior citizens who have lived here all their life who have to choose sometimes between food and medicine because they can barely afford to keep the roof over their head. I am confident this community can do better for all of its residents, and I thank you in advance for being part of the solution to making attainable housing a reality in Mount Pleasant. Thank you.
Thank you. You had 2 seconds to spare. I'm sorry you didn't use them. That was great. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Name and address. In 2 minutes, you'll hear the little bell.
My name is Louise Brown, and I live on Spark Street. And I'm very, very concerned about poor housing. We have no affordable homes in Mount Pleasant for people like your firemen, your teachers, your doctors, your food and beverage workers. We have no place for them. We have no affordable home for a husband and a wife that have to live with their parents, their grandparents, because there's no affordable house. You may say it's not important that we should worry about affordable homes. Yes, it is. Why is it important? Because we're not in the present. What are our futures going to look for our children, our grandchildren, and our great-grandchildren? It is important that we think about affordable homes, not about people on welfare and food stamps. No, we are not talking about them. We're talking about husbands, wives, single mother, single fathers that need housing. Let us, when y'all think about it, think about what the future will mean for your children and your grandchildren. Please, I beg you, let us get affordable housing so everybody in Mount Pleasant can live comfortable. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else before we move on our agenda? No one? All right, that will close the item 7, correspondence and public statements. This moves us to our amended items, which will pick up with what was 11A4, consideration of an ordinance with regard to firefighter units and staffing. Mr. Kinane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We went through a 4-month process at the Fire Committee of looking at different aspects of the fire department. And while we all agree that firefighters do a fantastic job, they put themselves out above and beyond, we noticed that the readiness of the actual department in terms of staffing, equipment, and redundancy was really not where it needed to be. And that maybe that's a tough thing to hear, but that came out as a result of 4 hard committees where the fire leadership gave us reports on where we really are. And the objective of my putting this on the agenda was to look forward. And I'm going to have 4 motions on how we can improve the fire department tonight as a result of those 4 committee meetings and studies that have shown where we really are. Would you like me to make the 4 motions at once or take them individually?
Yes, sir. To maintain the floor, you have to make a motion.
First motion is to direct legal staff to prepare an ordinance to bring to Fire Committee in March concerning minimum firefighter staffing and requiring prompt reporting to council on all reductions to FD staffing or units. Ordinance to align with NFPA 1710 minimum staffing standards. That's the first motion.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
I would like Mr. Santos and then Mr.
Kevin, I appreciate it. I think this might want to go to the Police, Legal, and Judicial Committee because I don't know anything about this, and I don't want to be voting on something that I have no information on. The information you left me earlier was right before I came in, so I didn't get a chance to read it. But I think these issues need to go to the committee first. Let us look at it. Maybe there might be some other things that come out of it that will benefit the firemen as well. So I'd rather not vote on it right now. I'd rather let's send it to committee and let's talk about it in committee and then send it back to council after we've all had a chance to vet it.
Right. The purpose of this initial motion was to get the sense of council. Do we want to codify a staffing standard and meet national standards, or do we want to just let it roll? And further down, I have a motion about the strategic plan, which starts us in the right direction. But this would just there's been a number of cities that have passed a simple 1.5-page ordinance to require 4 firefighters on an apparatus, and maybe we can't do it in the first year. Sometimes it takes many years, but that's the objective: is to head us in the proper direction, point the ship in the right direction, if you will. And it's not all that controversial. It's pretty simple stuff. And I could have brought the ordinance tonight, but I was told not to have council opine first, so then it ends up to be a 3-cycle process. I have no issue at all with it going to any other committee. I just have issues with it taking months and months on end. If another committee wants to look at it, we can try to schedule the fire committee early, and then let any other committee you'd like to look at it. I think some of these will require finance to look at it as well, and I have no problem with that.
Mr. O'Rourke, you have the floor.
I think Gary said pretty well what I was saying, and I think it's difficult for us as a council to put an item on the agenda, have a motion, have a second, and vote, and never have the fire chief or his senior staff present, have an opportunity to answer questions or anything like that. I would feel better as a member of the fire committee to have this back in the committee if we can.
That's exactly what the motion does.
Remarks are directed to the chair.
Yes.
Did you want to be recognized again?
Well, Kevin, I was just saying, you are a fireman. You know a lot of this stuff. I'm not a fireman. I don't have a clue with a lot of this stuff as you're talking about. So I understand that you know a lot more than the rest of us do, but we need to be able to understand it before we vote on it. Now, you're asking him to draft something now that we don't have a clue what he's drafting. So that's why I want it to go to committee so that we can explain it. You can explain it to us in the committee, He can have his questions, we can have our questions so that we understand it, so that when we come back here to council, we all know what we're voting on. Right now, I don't know what I'm...
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir, you have
the Mayor. I'd like to ask legal if they could opine on the length of... I did share a sample ordinance that was rather simple, and perhaps he could shed some light on the fact that it's not going to take months to do this. It's probably a matter of filling in our name where another city has done this already. We may have a couple of items. Like, I would like council to know when the fire department is being cut. I think that's a fair addition to the ordinance, but we could discuss all that. The idea is, yes, bring it back to committee with something that could actually be discussed, not to create analysis paralysis where it's there for months or kicked between 5 committees. So, Mr. Paglarini, if you could explain, how involved you think the process is.
Well, certainly I think if you've sent, and you have, sent us a model ordinance, if the town wishes to adopt something similar to a model ordinance, it's a fairly simple drafting procedure. I assume it would mean meeting with you to discuss details so that it could be presented to the appropriate committees.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Owens.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Cunane, is it your intent to create an ordinance that that allows the town to continue its effort in the NFPA 1710 guidance? The NFPA is a regulatory agency that provides guidance for our fire department and our...
Yes, sir. They're not really regulatory, but our own fire chief has called it the gold standard of fire response. So, to quote my friend, Mr. Santos, why should we do this? Because we're Mount Pleasant, that's why.
Well, my question is that...
May I interject? Hang on. Does anyone else want to speak? Because under our rules of operation, everyone gets a chance to speak once before other members speak twice. Mr. Bremer.
Yeah, I'll just add that as the chair of the fire committee, this item has already been added to the March committee meeting agenda. So we will be discussing this in our next committee meeting. Personally, I'm just a little uncomfortable voting for anything tonight without the information that we need. I think committee is the proper place for us to have this presented, to have it discussed, to share concerns, get questions answered. And from that committee meeting, if legal then wants to take the feedback that they get and draft something for us, for council to consider for first reading next month, I think that would be appropriate. But I think just kind of putting something out there asking for our support without really having the information behind it really isn't the best way to do business here.
Others? All right, so we have a motion. We have a second. We've had discussion. Are we prepared to vote?
There's people who signed up to speak.
All right, that's what I was getting to. Do we have any comments from the public? Yes, sir. Name, address, 2 minutes, please.
How you doing? Bill Pesatore, 2259 Sandy Point Lane. As you go forward and hopefully consider this, I would also recommend that you look into your high-rise structures, your taller buildings. The NFPA standard for that alone is 43 people for a fire in a building like that. The NFPA standard for a garden apartment strip mall is 28 people. Right now, I believe we run about 30 people on staff. Yes, it's going to be a financial impact on the town. But as the town grows, we get stretched out, we have traffic problems, we have issues getting from point A to point B. How do we get the people from point A to point B? But if you have more people on a vehicle that respond to the scene, we can get to work faster and they can do more. I just ask you to consider all these things as you move forward on looking into NFPA 1710. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Seeing none, we have, does anyone else need to be recognized to speak? Yes, sir, Mr. Owens.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Just to clarify, the motion is to just shore up the town's ordinance or create a town's ordinance for NFPA 1710 staffing. Is everybody, I think, on this council realizes NFPA is a standard for fire protection. And I think it would be, really proper for us to vote on a first reading, knowing that we've got 6 months between the first reading and the second reading to send it through committee. But to be on the record that it's our goal to perform our duties that we approve an NFPA guideline, I think would be appropriate. Thank you.
Mr. Bustos.
Yes, thank you. Since this all has kind of percolated to the top about the NFPA, I've been doing some research and trying to find out. My first question was, have we ever adopted NFPA as our standard that we want our fire department to aspire to? We do have certifications. There are a number of agencies around. Some of these NFPA standards have been adopted by OSHA, and I think what OSHA adopts, then we're obligated to look at. But actually, the NFPA leadership, Mr. Pauly, has never been a fireman. He's an electrical engineer, and they do their rules by committee, which are, they have proposals and then they vote on them. And I'm not so sure we get the best product for that. So I feel we need to find out, for at least I want to find out for my own satisfaction, is NFPA really the gold standard? We have our fire department certified, accredited. We have our police department accredited. I just think there's more to look at now than just blindly say, and NFPA was actually started by insurance companies. Insurance companies are doing this. They sell books, they have courses, they do a lot of for-profit things, although they're listed as a nonprofit. So I really think we need to find out if it's in the best interest of our town, whether NFPA or accreditation. We spend a lot of money on all those things, and I think we need to take a little time. As you've often heard me say, you want it bad, you get it bad. I think this needs to go to committee, and needs a thorough discussion and a thorough look at NFPA, accreditation, and there are several others that give guidance for police departments. So I agree that it would seem much better to go to committee and have a discussion and some investigation so that we're not chasing these things. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, Ms. Lanning.
At this point, it sounds to me like we have two very different ways of approaching this. What was initially a motion made and then seconded is what we would be voting on, as far as I understand, unless someone amends that who was the original person. Isn't that correct? And yet it sounds like a lot of folks are saying rather than direct legal to now draft an ordinance and so forth, that a lot of us, perhaps a lot of folks might feel that we should go back to committee. So how do we revert back other than the original motion being amended? You have to vote against it, because I don't know that a lot of... The
motion would have to be amended, or we have to vote on the motion or withdrawn. And we have a motion on the floor that is to direct legal to begin writing the ordinance, which would not go through the committee, but the chairman of the committee has said it is on the committee agenda.
So then I would like to make an amended motion to send this matter back to the Police, Judicial, and Legal Committee and/or Fire Committee both before we vote on directing legal to draft an ordinance.
One moment for parliamentary consultation.
Sure. Again, I think the motion's proper. I just think as a practical matter, it's probably not necessary to amend. The motion, as I understand it, is to have legal prepare a document for presentation. It is based on an existing model ordinance, which is already there. Whether legal drafts one or not, we'll have the model ordinance. So I'm not sure it's necessary to say to amend. I think it would be more appropriate to either ask legal to draft it or go with the model ordinance as is and go from there.
So as I interpret that, we are stuck with the motion on the floor for coming up for a vote after the end of discussion, and then there can be subsequent motions, depending on the outcome of that one.
But if a number of us, excuse me for adding something, but if a number of us are thinking this should go to committee first to be looked at, and we vote against this tonight, it's seeming like we're against the idea. I don't understand what
Someone
we're
could
voting on.
make, I'll defer.
Well, first of all, no motion is necessary to bring a matter to committee. That does not, I mean, you can do it as a matter of council.
Point of personal privilege. I did bring this to request of the committee chair for 2 months to hold a committee meeting, and it was denied due to scheduling or whatever else. This is not some end run around committee. It's just to codify that this is going to be on the committee. We're going to hold a meeting, and whatever happens, we still have first and second reading. And just in response to another point was, fire departments in this country were started by insurance companies as well, not just the NFPA, just as a matter of history. So something to think about.
Yes, Ms. Whitley.
I'm sort of with the rest of council in thinking that this is an item for committee discussion, and with Joe in saying that it is not clear that this particular standard is the one we want to adopt. We have an accredited fire department. We have a strategic plan that is in place. I think that these are all things that need to be considered, and there's a lot more information that needs to be given out to council for us to understand. Rather than task legal, I think that it makes more sense to bring that model ordinance to committee and have committee vet it, rather than expending legal hours and dollars to draft a full ordinance when that may not be what the fire committee comes out with in the end.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to call for the question, please.
All right. We have a motion to end debate and call for the question. That requires a 2/3 vote of council. And there is no discussion, so all in favor of ending debate so that we may move to the vote, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion passes, so debate is closed. We'll now vote on the underlying motion. Would you like to read the motion again in its entirety so that we get the full?
The first motion, as I said, there will be others. The first is a motion to direct legal staff to prepare an ordinance to bring to fire committee in March concerning minimum firefighter staffing and requiring prompt reporting to council on all reductions to FD staffing or units. The ordinance to align with NFPA 1710 minimum staffing standards.
Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right.
The first of 4. Yes,
all right.
sir.
So we will now have the vote. We will try a voice vote unless it gets confusing, and then we'll have to do a roll call. So we'll voice vote. All in favor of the motion as stated, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I lost it.
Didn't work. I said aye.
Roll. Okay. So how many?
We've had a voice vote. Do we just have the ayes? 1, 2, 3?
Everybody just raise your hand
Yes.
real quick so I can.
Aye.
4. 4 on the aye.
4.
Tom, Kevin, Tim, and who else?
That's it. Is it 3?
I'm sorry, I thought
3.
you raised your hand.
All right.
No, and Kevin.
All opposed? No.
No.
Yeah, no.
So by 6-3 vote, the motion fails.
Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to defer the rest of this issue in full to committee and move on to the next item of the agenda.
We have a motion to defer. This would be item, as written, it was item 8A4. It is now, I'm sorry, item 11A4. It is now item 8A. Consideration of an ordinance with regard to firefighter units and staffing. This entire agenda item will be deferred to committee. We have a motion. We have a second. Do we have any discussion?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Mr. Kinane.
I did break this up into 4 pieces for a reason, because after speaking to people, I realized that there's some that are very, for whatever reason, controversial. There's other ones that are extremely non-controversial. And one of the things that just strikes me is, having been in many firefighter funerals over the years, when they hand in that helmet to the child, you know, every politician is there and saying, hey, we did everything we could. We're always going to be there for you. And being there for those fallen firefighter families is something that this country does. But taking the bold action and being there for them before the tragedy strikes, that's a little bit more of a bold action. And that's all we're asking is to step back and say, is there anything we can do to make things better for our firefighters? If you read the minutes from those 4 months of review on the fire department situation currently, it's just not where we need to be. The town has grown. Can we see this slide, please? If you look at this slide, when we had 54,000 people in town, we had 8 fire apparatus. The top line, the orange line, goes up as population. When we were at 84,000, and today I think we're at 86, we're back to 8. In the middle there, we went up to 10, back down to 9. I mean, to me, it's pretty clear we're going the wrong way. And the strategic plan even brings that up. And one of the things I was going to bring up as a separate motion, which now I'm being shut down apparently by, or trying to be shut down, is to direct the town staff to place the previously passed fire department strategic plan into a priority position for funding and implementation. The chief has asked for another ladder truck. This would allow it to make a council policy decision that that's an important priority. When we looked at the strategic plan 5-year review from Mr. DeMora at the retreat, there was things over the 5 years that got done quickly, other things got done towards the end of the plan, and there were some things that didn't make completion. Most of them did get completed, but there were some things that didn't. So by making it a priority to make the fire department strategic plan a top priority, we're going to ensure through council policy that that new ladder truck that the chief has asked for will be purchased in the next 5 years. And the other thing was a motion to direct the town staff to prepare a report to council budget committee on the feasibility of purchasing 1 ladder and 1 engine apparatus using fund balance. The logic behind that was that we can see from this chart that the fire department has not grown in accordance with the population. Somewhere along that line, those funds were directed elsewhere. And at the end of every year, after Mr. DeMora informs me that's from good fiscal management, there's money left over and it goes into the fund balance. So over those years, some of those funds should have been rightfully directed to the fire department, and for whatever reason, they were not. I know there was a dip in there for recession and everything else, so I'm not blaming anyone. I'm just saying that that blue line should be catching up to the orange line on that chart. So to look at fund balance was another one of my motions that now we don't want, I guess we're not going to speak about. You know, and the third was this very simple motion, which is probably the least controversial of all. It would be a motion to direct town staff to investigate and report back to council on the possibility of obtaining a SAFER grant from FEMA. The SAFER grant stands for Staffing for Adequate Fire and Emergency Response Grant. It was created to provide funding directly to fire departments in order to help them increase the number of trained frontline firefighters available in their communities. As a matter of fact, we have used a very similar type of grant for a police hiring, and it worked out very well. So I don't understand why we're going to squelch debate on 3 things that really are the simpler of the 4.
You finished?
No.
You have the floor.
Okay. This is probably the least controversial thing that's come before this council in the time I've served here. But for whatever reason, we're creating an analysis paralysis where it has to go to 3 different committees before we can decide whether we want to do the right thing by our firefighters and our civilians and our citizens. I urge my fellow council members to vote no on the motion to stop debate. Thank you.
The chair will take the floor. I just want to say that we have a committee structure on this council so that we don't pass bad ordinances, so that we don't end up taking 2 hours on second reading for an ordinance that passed unanimously on first reading, as happened recently. And Mr. Kinane is on the fire committee. The fire committee will do its job. The fire committee is meeting next month, and these things will, less than a month now, and these items will be on the fire committee agenda where they will get the detailed attention and expert input that they deserve, and I resent the notion that doing work that way is not caring about the safety of our citizens. Now, are we prepared to call the question?
Move to call the question.
All right, we have a motion to call the question. Do we have a second? Second. All right, it is not debatable. All in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
7-2. All right, so we will call the question. All in favor of the motion to defer this entire item to the Fire Committee at its March meeting, please signify. Yes, sir.
Mayor, can we also add it to the Police, Legal, and Judicial Committee as well, if he's going to be working on an ordinance?
Happy to.
So we have an amended motion.
Amended.
And an amended
That's
second.
not is that point of parliamentary procedure for the parliamentarian. Is it proper to amend a motion to stop debate with further action?
It has to be a separate parliamentary procedure. It has to be a motion to amend and a vote. What I would suggest, though, is that if the PLJ chair wishes to have it on PLJ, they can simply agree to do that on the record, and it will be done.
There you go.
Thank you, sir.
I will agree to do that on the record, and it will be done. So the motion, as originally seconded and debated, is to defer this to the Fire Committee at its March meeting. All right, so we have closed debate. All in favor of the motion to defer signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
The motion passes 8-1 to defer.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that we also send it to the Finance and Budget Committees so that we can keep this from getting mired in months of committee. I would like to see this come back as soon as possible.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any discussion?
Yeah, just a point of clarification, Mr. Mayor. What exactly is going to the committees at this point?
If we are in discussion, I guess it begs the question, how does finance know what to do if the Fire Committee hasn't said this is what it needs, right? Is that what you were going to say, Mr.
Well, I think it's
have the
bigger
floor.
than that, because it's hard to look at the town's budget in just one department without looking at the whole. So I guess we can bring it in, and we could end up by saying that, you know, in concept, we may agree on things. But until the entire budget is done and packaged for a full vote, I don't really think I don't think we can leave the Finance Committee with a definitive answer of a yes or a no. I think no matter what comes out of committee has to be put into the budget, shaken up, discussed, compromised, and then we come up with that. So I don't have any problem putting it on the agenda at all. But I don't think we're going to come out of that by saying this will definitely be funded, because I don't think we have the authority for that.
Okay. May I ask, to clarify the motion, what is being sent to the Finance Committee?
I would like to send the feasibility of purchasing one ladder and one engine apparatus using fund balance, as well as to direct town staff to investigate and report back to council on the possibility of obtaining a safer grant for firefighter hiring from FEMA.
Is that an amendment of the motion or just a clarification?
Clarification.
Clarification, okay. Yes, sir, Mr.
I'm trying to
O'Rourke.
help Mr. Cunane get to his finish line. And I think it would be better if you don't specify where those funds will come from. Let that happen. Maybe if it's agreed upon, we can go back and figure that out. But if you say definitely now that the discussion will be from fund balance,
okay, so
then I'm saying
you're the chair, so can you put
we'll put it on, but I think if...
Excuse me,
I'm
point of
sorry.
order.
Asking me a question,
All
Mr. Mayor.
comments are directed to the chair.
Mayor, he
under
asked me a
Robert's
question.
Rules of Order.
He asked me a
No, sir.
question.
Under Robert's Rules, which...
That's fine, Mr. Mayor, may I answer
Sir,
the
you are
question?
out of order. You are out of order.
As are you.
No, sir, I am the chair. Now, under Robert's Rules of Order, which by ordinance has the force of law in the town of Mount Pleasant, all comments are directed to the chair. So you direct them to the chair, and the chair recognizes people. It also says that no one speaks twice until every member has had the opportunity to speak once. That is the law. Mr. O'Rourke, you have the floor.
I would like to see if there is a desire to amend the motion to not include the funding source as we discuss this in the Finance Committee.
Mr. Cunane, as the originator of the motion, would you like to amend your motion?
Since Mr. O'Rourke is the finance chair, I'm more than happy to let him decide how he puts things on his committee. However, the purpose of it was to avoid 6 months of bouncing between committees. So I'm glad if he wants to put it his way, that's fine with me.
So in effect, are you withdrawing the motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay, the motion is withdrawn. All right, so that concludes that item. So we are now on what is number 8B, discussion on safety improvements for bicycle pedestrian access to the Lucy Beckham High School campus. Before we get into anything, I would like to say that as chairman of the Transportation Committee, I was at the meeting Wednesday night, which was a workshop. It was not a public meeting. It was a publicly held workshop. It was not a meeting for public input. The chair of the District 2 Constituent Board Trustees has asked that our staff meet and make a presentation at their March meeting. The day after that meeting, I met with Mr. DeMora. We went over that. Our staff and our planning staff is working on the population numbers and working on everything that has to do with accessibility, safety, traffic management, anything that could possibly make getting to the new Lucy Beckham High School, which will open in 2020, more feasible and safer. So this is underway. It really should not have been put on the agenda tonight because the work was already being done, but it was put on the agenda. It is on the committee agenda for the March meeting, which does not require any action of council tonight. Mrs. Whitley.
May I make a motion to defer this item in full to committee and move on to the next item of the agenda?
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. You have the floor.
I placed this on the agenda because there was 40 or so members of the public at the workshop meeting at Lang last week that were shocked and dismayed by the fact that the district seemed to not have a real knowledge of any work with the town. And the concern is that this hasn't been a school location in a while, and at one time it had all sorts of pedestrian access. There's been a few projects in the area. So I put it on the agenda to attempt to have the town look at it from a multidisciplinary standpoint, which would include having town staff examine pedestrian and bicycle access to the Beckham High School site, and to report back to council in whichever committee was relevant, what, if any, improvements can be made, and what, if any, budget implications exist to do so. And the reason for putting it on was because that places us in the position of having 2 budget cycles if we have anything that we have to address. There was a group from Laurel Lakes neighborhood, and they report that they could easily bike to the school, but there's a small spot that needs some attention. Looking at it, you can't tell in front of a vacant lot whether it's town or county, whether it's an SCDOT road, or whether it's private property, what the right-of-way is, et cetera. Our experts will be able to tell us that, and that was the purpose of putting this on, to get it done sooner rather than later, to have a look by the town.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we have a motion. We have a second. We've ended discussion. Is there anyone here to address this from the public? We already heard from Kristen in the public comments. Seeing none, all in favor of the motion to defer this to the Transportation Committee at our March meeting, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
I would like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
The matter has been deferred. It is off the table. The matter has been deferred. So we are no longer on that agenda item. We are now on agenda item 8A, new business in planning. We're on page 3 of 8 of your agenda if you're following at home. Mr. Elma.
Thank you again, Mayor. In the interest of helping streamline meetings, and we started this at committee recently, we will present associated annexation and comprehensive plan and zoning requests for the same property together, and then you can deal with the separate items at your pleasure. So these are first reading for an ordinance to annex a piece of land, and then the first reading of the ordinance to zone that property area-wide business 2. Next one. This is about 3/4 of an acre of property. It is 3 parcels combined, and it's known as Foxtail Lane, but it's actually adjacent to Watermark, and between Watermark and Stuart Engels at Bowman Road. The comprehensive plan recommends commercial land uses for this site, and the owner is requesting AB2, and the lots are currently vacant. Next one. So here's the location of the property here in the center of the screen, highlighted in the...
I'll move for first reading of the annexation and the zoning.
Second.
Is that items 1 and 2, just to be clear?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve items A, 1, and 2, and we have a second. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Mr. Owens.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Alma, what is it currently zoned for?
In the county, it is R4, residential 4, so it's residential zoning. So that's why it would be brought into the town as a commercial zoning district.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir. Mr. Kinane.
Mr. Ulmer, can you tell me, sorry, Mr. Mayor, may I ask Mr. Ulmer a question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ulmer, can you tell me if a hotel is an acceptable use of in an AB that they're applying for?
I believe hotel use is permitted within AB2, yes.
Okay. That raises a concern. Back to what we just discussed with the fire department readiness. We have 2 hotels across the street. They're rather large. We don't have the firefighting resources in town for that. I'm very reluctant to approve anything that could potentially become another hotel. The reason I am concerned about that from a planning standpoint is that there's talk in this comprehensive planning group that just released their draft that we want hotel hubs and hotel zones and other things that really haven't been vetted by the neighborhoods yet. And do we want to put another 12-story hotel in this spot with all the attendant traffic, and that being a secondary concern, of course, to the issue of firefighting in a high-rise building. So we can leave this be and not have that issue. I mean, we gave the council an opportunity earlier this evening to start addressing, we have 30 firefighters in town on duty. A high-rise under the national minimum standard is required 43. So anything that could lead us to a high-rise, I'm very reluctant to approve at this point, considering that council didn't recognize that as an issue. So I don't know how we get from 30 to 43. If we were at 40 or 39, maybe I could live with it, but we're nowhere near where we need to be. And in light of that, I'm not comfortable zoning anything as AB at this point.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Lanning?
May I ask Mr. Olmo a
Yes.
question? So Jeff, can you tell us if this comes in as AB2, is there a height restriction already on that property?
AB2 generally has a height limit of, got the residential, non-residential AB2 height. Maximum is 35 feet, but allowed other heights depending on overlays and other requirements, and I'm not sure the specific location or the height. Typically, under our existing height limits, those buildings are in that 5-story range.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just a quick question. I know we got the applicant in the audience. The applicant also owns that piece of land right next to it. It's kind of a triangle. Well, I don't know if you call it a triangle or not, but anyway, right next to it, where the Hughes rental is. How big is that piece of property?
I'm going to guess about 3 times the size of what we're talking, almost 2 acres maybe.
And so that's
There's several
zoned,
parcels. There are several parcels there, so it's probably more than that.
so that's zoned AB2 as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so in theory, he could commingle those properties that he's getting ready to annex into that one, into one larger piece, correct?
Yes, if it's all under common ownership, yes.
Okay, I'm just, you know, across the highway, there was we did the same thing for another piece of land, and we talked to the developer, and he wasn't planning on doing a hotel or anything. And then after he got the approval, I understand now he's planning on doing a hotel because we can't condition zoning. So we wouldn't be able to condition this as well if we bring this in, correct?
That's correct. The entire range of allowed uses or conditional uses, it's an all or nothing proposition with the zoning district and the uses that are allowed in it.
Can you tell us just some of the uses that are allowed in it?
AB2, let's see. You have residential are not, so we move to civic and community uses, church places of worship, educational facilities, government facilities, moving into recreation and entertainment, commercial recreation and entertainment. And
by that you mean what, like restaurants, bars?
Commercial entertainment and recreation might be bowling alley or those kinds of uses. And then moving into commercial in AB2, healthcare uses, general offices, boutique hotel or inn or hotel or extended, let's see, hotel, motel or extended stay, boutique hotel, and retail sales is without outdoor storage is a permitted use. So it's a full range of commercial activities.
I just wanted to, I heard Admiral Shimp earlier talk about getting the infrastructure in place before we approve higher density developments. And this could be one, since we can't condition it, this could end up being a higher use development, higher density development if it's a hotel. So, I agree with what the Admiral said. That's very important. And I know in the last election and the one before that, citizens were very serious about slowing the growth down until we get infrastructure in place. That's why, I voted against that other hotel over there, because the infrastructure is just not in place right now to handle it. I'm talking about the roads. So this could possibly be the same thing on the other side. We have no control over it.
Yes, Ms. Lanning.
So these are just comments and questions. So the comments are, first of all, I think it has been my impression that most people on council have been open to the idea and trying to work towards including the comprehensive plan idea to annex in as many of the donut holes that are appropriate, the ones that are commercial properties, including areas such as this, and not have these areas that are unincorporated that are not necessarily part of our historic settlement communities or anything of that nature, and have this annex in, and have it annex in this case where it matches the rest of the surrounding area, as opposed to annexing in and putting something sort of like apartment building or something. If it was our, what did you say it was our?
Currently, it's single-family residential under the county.
Okay, single family, okay. So putting houses there. So bringing in as AB2. But isn't it true, this is the question part. So it seems like this is in line with what we were already thinking of a lot of areas. In fact, we had one across the street off of Bowman. The question part is, isn't it true that any actual building that would have to go up would have to go before Planning Commission and would have there would be, especially if there's any height variance or anything involved? In other words, there's something else before something.
It could be a variety. No, I mean, if it met the zoning and a site plan were submitted that met the standards, it would be a design review board review in terms of architectural and site layout, but they wouldn't have the authority to make decisions about taller buildings or allowing other uses. They'd have to go with what the allowed use is and the standards. They would be looking at orientation and layout and architecture, the skin of the building, as they would be reviewing a specific development proposal.
So in that description, if somebody wants to be able to annex in property, request that of us, and wants to bring it in to match the surrounding area, but we don't know what they're going to build and we have no control over that that the way it sounds right now is that some people would be uncomfortable annexing it in just because we don't know what's going to be built there. So this is sort of a chicken before the egg question. So my question is there any other way this could be brought in, like say economic development, if it was a particular project or a planned development that could help those concerns up front?
On the latter, in a planned development, it's a mix of uses is required. So just one use, looking at it for economic development purposes would be another bigger, broader discussion.
Well, I just need to add, the question before us, legally and in a parliamentary sense, is only that one strip right there. So we are not rezoning the other, and legal did just advise me in your question. Anything that goes there that generates a certain number of trips per day is subject to the impact assessment of council. So before anything big went there, if there are infrastructure concerns, this council can vote it down as it has done other things. So just wanted to give you that came from legal.
Yeah, I missed that one.
Okay, well, you weren't asked about impact assessment, but yeah. Yes, Mr. Bustos first.
Yeah, I would like to draw everyone's attention to the fact that that piece of land is on Watermark Boulevard, which is, of a size that it handles the apartment buildings.
Can you step up to your microphone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's on Watermark Boulevard, which is of a size to handle MSC and the apartments back there by Mediterranean shipping. So I think for that size piece of land, actually the road infrastructure is there, and that was one of the things that we looked at. That it's on Watermark Boulevard, which is part of Hungry Neck, or leads to Hungry Neck.
Thank you, Mr. Canay.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask Mr. Ulmer a question?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Ulmer, I missed the part where someone asked you what the height would be under the corridor overlays in that area?
I don't have the overlay, Mr. Cunane, in that location, so I don't have the specific height, any other specific height limitations.
You saying there's no overlay in that area?
No, I'm not sure where the overlay begins and ends in that general vicinity. We don't have that overlay map up here.
In light of that,
the overlay does allow taller buildings like 75 or 50, depending on locations.
Okay, in light of that, I would like to ask that the yellow book that was shaking in my face a few moments ago be consulted if necessary, but I'd like to see this deferred until we can get that answer. Make a motion to defer until such time as we have the height.
It can't make a motion to defer.
We have a combined motion on the floor for approval of A1 and A2.
I'd like to call the question if it's okay.
Is that a motion?
Is that allowed?
You can make a motion to call the question. It needs a second, and there's no debate.
I'd like to make a motion to call the question.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to call the question. It is not debatable. All in favor of calling the question signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No.
No.
Is that two?
Who were the noes?
Mr. Brimmer and Mr. Canane. All right, so by a 7-2 vote, just a second, please. 7-2 vote, it passes. There is no more debate. The motion is to approve items A1 and A2. All in favor of the motion to approve items A1 and A2 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
No.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Santos.
No.
Mr. Santos votes no. Ms. Whitley.
Aye.
Ms. Whitley votes yes. Mr. Brimmer.
Aye.
Mr. Brimmer votes yes. Mr. Bustos.
Yes.
Mr. Bustos votes yes. Mr. Cunane.
No.
Mr. Cunane votes no. Ms. Landing.
Aye.
Ms. Landing votes yes. Mr. O'Rourke.
No.
Mr. O'Rourke votes no. Mr. Owens.
No.
Mr. Owens votes no. Mayor Haney.
Aye.
Mayor Haney votes yes.
Motion passes 5-4.
First reading ordinance number 19002, an ordinance to annex an approximately .66 acre tract of land in Charleston County comprised of 3 parcels. 1, a .12 acre parcel at 1259 Foxtail Lane. 2, a .31 acre parcel at 12 1251 Foxtail Lane, and 3, a .23 acre parcel on Melvin Bennett Road, shown on Plat Book BJ, page 169 in the Charleston County ROD. First reading ordinance number 19004, an ordinance to zone AB2 area-wide business 2 district, an approximately .66 acre tract of land comprised of 3 parcels. 1, a .12 acre parcel at 1259 Foxtail Lane. 2, a .31 acre parcel at 1251 Foxtail Lane. And 3, a .23 acre parcel on Melvin Bennett Road, shown in Plat Book BJ, page 169, Charleston County ROD.
This brings us to items number 3, 4, and 5, which are connected.
Yes, sir.
And consulting with legal, we would have to vote on each one of these.
Well, again, like the last one, I think it might be appropriate if all council felt that voting for any combination together is appropriate, but if anyone disagreed on any one of them, then they have to be taken separately. And Mayor, just as an additional matter, I would note on item 3 for the annexation, that .41 acre should match 4 and 5. It should be .27 acres, and we can, if it makes it to final reading, we can correct it at that time.
So it is, instead of .41, it is .27?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it, thank you. Does everyone see that in item 3? 0.27 acres.
Mr. Mayor, I'd suggest that we take these items separately.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I will turn it over to Mr. Ulma for item 3 then.
Yes, sir. This is a request for an annexation, a comprehensive plan amendment, and a zoning designation on this property. The property is currently improved with a single-family residence, but it's operating as a business, as a speaker early in the evening indicated. The comprehensive plan recommends community conservation in this particular location. They're asking for a commercial land use designation with AB2 commercial zoning. Next slide, please. Here's the location of the property, located between Hungry Neck and Highway 17. And you can see right along the edge at Halls Pond Road is the boundary line between the commercial on one side and the community conservation on the other. And this request would be bringing that commercial designation in the land use plan in this direction. Next one. Adjacent properties already in the area along Benning Road are in an AB zoning district designation. This request is for AB2, and that would cover any commercial outdoor storage or activities. Next one, and there's the location of the property again for the annexation. So I've covered most of those. For reference, we are in the process, as you know, of updating our comprehensive plan, and the planning effort has identified changing conditions in this particular location. So that boundary line is proposed to actually move further towards Hungry Neck. So that split between commercial red on one side and the yellow gold community conservation, the current draft of the new plan suggests that it be commercial moving in that direction to acknowledge all of the different commercial uses and activities that are already there. This property too is zoned R4, single family residential. Next one. And the other properties have AB or county zoning of R4. This site is used as an office for this concrete construction business. And they would then, if it were approved, it's served by Halls Pond Road, which is a private, unimproved dirt road. And if this were approved, in order to be able to do the outdoor storage, that would need special exception approval. And in order to do the commercial, any commercial additional changes, that would be a DRB process of review. The Planning Commission recommended 4-2, and the Planning Committee had no recommendation on this one.
What was the 4-2 from the Commission? To approve or not to approve?
To approve, excuse me.
And it did not get an approval in our Planning Committee, as I understand it?
Correct, sir.
Okay. You have a motion? Yes.
Yeah, I'll make a motion. We approve item number 3 for annexation.
So the motion is to approve item number 3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Mr. Mayor, I think we have a speaker.
All right.
Mr. Goodrich, are you here, sir? Do you want to speak on this item or on number 4 or 5? You're representing the owner? But perhaps, sir, wait till the next item. That's okay? Okay.
Yes, sir. Mr. Brimmer?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this particular item was unusual in that it came with no recommendation from Planning Committee, either approval or denial. I can't speak for the other members, but the reason that I didn't take a position on this one in committee was I didn't feel it was right to say, yes, we'll annex you in, but then turn down his request for what he wanted to do with the property. I wasn't comfortable with the AB2 request, even though I understand why it's being requested. I think we just had a discussion on the appropriateness of AB2 in parts of town, and this would be the only AB2 property anywhere near this area. So I just didn't feel like it was appropriate for me to say, yep, come on into town, but nope, can't do what you want to do with it. So that explains my vote in committee.
Thank you. I watched this being debated in the committee as well, and for the same reasons, Mr. Brimmer, I plan to vote against this annexation because I am not on board with the AB2, given how far this is into a neighborhood and into an area that that has been community conservation. Any other comments? Are we ready to vote? Yes, sir. Mr. Kane.
Mr. Ulmer, can you tell me what the height that would be allowed in this if it was AB2, sir?
AB2 would be, again, the same height limitations. This is in another overlay district, which limits the size of buildings or limits the square footage.
No, there was a hotel right in the area there. I believe it's now going to be a Hyatt at Hungry Neck behind the Chevrolet dealer. That should be in this same zone, correct? Same type of overlay?
That was probably part of the Midtown Planned Development District, so it might have had other.
I believe it was in the community conservation at one point. But what my concern is again, someone conglomerating the properties and deciding that they want to go up when we have a fire department that is not capable of handling buildings that go up with the proper manpower, and we now have a council that doesn't view that as a priority. So.
I want to object to your comment. Please address the motion at hand, and please quit judging the motives of others. Thank you.
Point of personal privilege, Mr. Mayor. Every time a property can be built as a high-rise, I will remind the council of the fact that we don't have a fire department that's proper for that size building. It's okay if you don't like it, and you can use all the parliamentary tricks you like, sir, to try and quelch me from saying what I want to say, but you're not going to stop me. The question I asked related to the height ties to the zoning.
That was not my objection, sir. Point of my personal privilege was your inserting motives of others, which is expressly prohibited by our rules.
I'm sure waving a book in someone's face.
I'm not waving a book. You're all the way down there, sir. I'm way down here. So, all right. Are there any other comments that have to do with the motion to approve item number 3, which is annexation?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
Can we see the picture again? So you said about the gold and the, let's go back to this other one. So where are the residential, where are the homes?
Residential, the crosshatched is county property with a lot of residential uses. The aerial photo Martine may show us back to. One more.
Okay.
There you start to see the sort of the commercial or office uses along Venning,
which are
and then the residential behind.
So, okay, so towards Venning, the left side going down Halls Pond are commercial.
Yes, the
and
entry.
And then according to the speaker, we have 2 residents that live on that other side, and they're both okay with this, but we don't know that for sure, but that's what we're hearing.
I believe further in, which goes in and turns to make a cul-de-sac.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Ehrlich, let me ask you a question. If the motion to annex this passes, and then amending the comp plan and changing the zoning fails, we will have annexed a piece of property in as R1 that is currently being used commercial.
No, it's currently used as a home.
Is that correct?
No, it's currently
It automatically gets annexed in as R1.
Not with first
Or
reading.
CC, community conservation, maybe under that designation.
Either way,
it could even
we
be
will have
less.
annexed in a piece of property that automatically is non-compliant. Is that right? Yes.
Probably yes.
The answer I'm getting from the administrator in legal is yes. So we can't give these other things unless we annex it first because we don't have governance over it. But I urge you to look at these other things and see if you're willing to vote those, or we will have annexed something in and created a non-compliant use within the town. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, this is just first reading, so after this, he may come up and change his mind and want to do something else. We don't have to have...
He may, but what's before us today is this.
But what I'm saying is, this, just because we vote on this doesn't make it so. We got to have second reading. So in the next 30 days, he may come up with a different idea that then second reading we can vote it in or not. I mean, so it doesn't bind him by us doing it now, is what I'm saying.
Ms. Lanning.
I'm sorry to keep asking questions, but this is still a little confusing. So what we have right now is a business that is in the county as a concrete-related business?
Office for a concrete construction company, yes.
Okay, and they want to annex in, but if they annex in right now, just because of the way the comprehensive plan is, it would come in as community conservation, which wouldn't work with their business, so they're asking to have an amendment to that and then come in as AB2, so that what they already are will be compliant with coming into the town. So we're basically saying, we don't want you in the town if we don't annex them in and allow them to do AB2. That is essentially what we're saying.
Question. Their request is to make it conform to the operation that they already have.
Right.
The zoning request.
Okay. Ms. Whitley?
If we go back a few slides, I think the reason they asked for AB2 is because they want to add storage, so they're not currently using it for storage, because that wouldn't be allowed under their county usage either, where it's zoned. Right, because I thought that was what the slide
may need
said.
to talk. There may be some outdoor equipment, but not full-blown storage.
Okay.
It's kind of a business operation.
Were you asking to be recognized? Oh, you were approaching the mic. All right. Are we through with discussion? All right. The motion is to approve item number 3, which is the annexation of this tract. All in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed?
No.
No. All right. All in favor, please raise your hand so the clerk can see. 1, 2, 3.
Tom, Kathy, Gary.
3. And all opposed? 6. So the motion fails. So that makes items 4 and 5 moot, but did you say we need to vote on
No,
this?
sir, we did discuss that, but I don't believe we do. I believe they're rendered moot. There is no reason to vote on amending the comprehensive plan and zoning without
Because we have no governance over it.
That's correct.
All right, so item number 3 is denied. 4 and 5 then are moot points, which brings us to item number 6. Mr. Altman.
Six and 7 are 2 similar requests for 1-year extensions of vested rights within the Bridgeside 2 Planned Development District. And this first one relates to a property or a development known as the Legacy at Patriots Point. Next slide, please. The location of this property is adjacent to the Shrine Temple, as you see outlined there in red, on the east side of Harry Hallman and at Patriots Point Boulevard. And this request is part of the Bridgeside 2 Planned Development District. And it's harder to see here, but it's on sort of that east side between the Shrine Temple in gray that you see shaded out, and Harry Hallman is realigned, or a different, slightly different alignment from the original concept plan. Their request is to extend, receive a 1-year extension of their vested rights, and under our state law and our ordinance, unless something has changed in the zoning code that would preclude them from pursuing the development that was originally approved, council is obligated, the town is obligated, the approval body is obligated to approve these extension requests.
Motion to approve 6 and 7.
Second.
We have a motion to approve 6 and 7. We have a second. Yes, sir, Mr. Canay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jeff, the portion, Mr. Ulmer, may I ask Mr. Ulmer a question, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, you may.
Mr. Ulmer, the portion in red there that talks about the ordinance amendment, I attended the planning committee meeting, and if you could just run through that again on exactly what that means. If our tree buffer has changed, would this project still be approved such that we would have that requirement to extend the vested rights, or is it up for question as to whether this plan will work with our new buffer ordinances?
It's the latter, Mr. Cunane. So if the ordinance has changed, and suppose using a simpler example, the original approval allowed a height of 60 feet and an ordinance changed to make it 50, it'd be pretty clear that we could say, you changed the ordinance, they can no longer build under the original approval. The only changes that we've done in this that would affect this are the ordinance amendments that you did last fall, dealing with tree and buffer and tree protection. And there may or may not be something that would preclude the development, but we don't know until they actually come in with a more definitive plan that we could evaluate it. Of most critical concern is the critical line buffer, which would be on the waterfront. For this legacy property, the first one, they're not near the marsh or the waterfront, so that buffer wouldn't even apply to them. For the Ferry Wharf side, closer to the water, that critical line buffer may or may not come into play as they move forward with the rest of their development. We would determine that when a specific development plan is submitted.
So
Sometimes it's clear and easy to say, we could recommend to you, you can't extend this vested right because the ordinance has changed in a fashion that they can't pursue the original development. In this case, we can't tell you that.
Your Honor, Mr. Haney, may I ask the legal counsel a question?
Please.
Mr. Pagliarini, can you tell us where you fall down on this question of the part in red here? Are we obligated under state law to pass this, or are we not obligated?
I think that the planning director has stated it appropriately and correctly. I believe when applied, it is an obligation, but this is different than some others we have seen because it is a planned development district. In this situation, there may be plans, in the future, that run counter to changes in our code that have already been made. We simply do not know that yet. So this is simply an extension of the PDD, Planned Development District rights, and nothing more than that. So any plan is still subject to review for determination as to whether it meets town standard.
And it would include a review on that portion?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
That's
thank
correct.
you, sir. My remarks are concluded. Honorable Mayor Haney.
Any other comments? Is there anyone here to address this? All right, so the motion is to approve the one-year extension of vested rights of items number 6 and 7. All in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimous. Brings us to section B, which would be old business.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, this is final reading of an ordinance to amend the Pepper Tract Plan Development District. And next one, Martine, you know and are familiar with this case. You've been reviewing it for several months now, up off Highway 17. It's part of the PDD. Next one.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Since this is final reading and we've been down this road a few times before, could I ask Mr. Alma to please just summarize the changes from the last meeting and where we stand today?
Yes, and may I ask, before we even do that, Mr. Pagliarini, we discussed this yesterday. I think everybody's ready to get on with this one. However, we just want to make sure we're in compliance with what was posted, what was noticed, and have we significantly departed from that to where we could cause ourselves a problem if we were to pass this?
And I think the best thing is for Mr. Alma, as requested, to explain the difference, because I think what he's about to explain, we have concluded that it would fall under proper notice. It is simply a matter for council to approve or not approve But it would have to be amended, of course. That would be it could be approved as is, it could be amended, it could be denied. Those are the options.
Thank you. Please.
Yes, sir. And the summary slides are coming up. Mr. Brimmer, next one, Martine. There have been no changes to the other part of the request that dealt with the changes to the square footage limitations on the buildings. So that's been the same through the entire process. And so you see, here are a couple of the excerpts from the appendix to the PD that show you those different changes. And there are 5 pages of these within the actual document itself. The proposed additional amendments deal with these 2 aspects. One is additional language dealing with an increased setback adjacent to the residential adjoining this property. And so the rear setback adjacent to Tupelo would be 35 feet as opposed to what it is today. And then you see on the bottom right, considerable time was spent with the applicant and the adjoining property owners and staff in reviewing this in order to be able to locate the commercial uses here. The applicant proposes that a 35-foot landscape buffer be adjacent to the existing residential. That would be have a 6-foot berm, which would be planted, and a 3-foot wooden fence on top of that for additional screening. And that berm could meander or move through that 35-foot landscape buffer in order to take into account things like drainage, significant trees to be protected, and additional language that would say it would be designed to minimize to the maximum we can any drainage implications for the adjoining residential, and it would be placed closer to the commercial side, the rural commercial, than it would be to the single-family residential. So as this has progressed through the process, staff believes that this ties to those square footages and the size of buildings, and it's a fair thing to think about different setbacks or buffers as the building sizes change. So we see that as an extension of the original request, and we would view this as appropriate that council could amend at second reading to incorporate this language.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that we amend this item as Mr. Alma has outlined with all the changes that have been shown in red here.
All right, we have a motion to amend.
Second.
We have a second from Mrs. Landing. Discussion. I would ask, are there people from the adjoining property here who would like to speak during discussion? And then if y'all would like to speak. Okay, so yes, sir. If you would like to approach the microphone, give your name and address, and then we'll have council discussion.
Just these 2 things. Just these 2 things are about.
Adam Dunes, 1011 Banker Court. Just quick, what he mentioned is exactly what we agreed to. I just want to make that clear, as I know previously it was up for debate as far as if we were in agreement or not. And we did. You know, there's been lots of ups and downs with coming to an agreement, but we feel like we came to something we can live with. And I just want to thank some of the council members, Mr. Cunane and Mr. Brimmer, for at least making us feel like our voices were heard, and that we weren't some crazy residents who were just complaining to complain, and not in my backyardism. But I appreciate all that.
Thank you. Council. Yes, sir, Mr. Brimmer.
Just wanted to verify, Mr. Cook is here, I see. Tim, this is all good with you on your end? Okay.
Good. Yes, sir, Mr. Cunane.
I'd like to thank Mr. Cook for sticking it out, and also the residents. I think it's been 6 or 7 months probably, and the final product is going to be better because of it. So thank you to everyone involved.
We have a motion to, yes, sir.
I just want a clarification on the motion. Is it for only these things we're looking at right here in red, or is it for the square footage, the increased square footage of the buildings?
The motion was to take the original ordinance and include these proposed amendments as part of that ordinance.
So you're saying that increasing the square footage of the buildings are in this?
That's in the original.
Everything that was shown, yes. Everything, the original plus these changes.
Okay.
That's what everyone agreed to.
Can you go back just one or two? I wanted to see that square footage again. You put in, if you don't mind. So that's an 80,000 square foot grocery store?
Yes, that one.
Okay.
Mr. Ullman, may I ask a question?
Yes.
This does not increase the total amount that's allowed to be developed at this site. Is that my understanding?
That's correct, Mayor.
Okay.
There's a cap of a little under 200,000 square feet for the entire site.
So the total amount that can be developed there is not being changed. It's just a matter of different categories of buildings. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
A couple of comments. First of all, I just want to also thank Mr. Cook and the neighbors surrounding in the Tupelo plantation area for their time and effort, both in coming to Economic Development Committee meetings, which we invited you to, and in your work together on the side, because what this was after first reading, when we didn't really have any input from the neighborhood, was something that passed quickly, and then we found out that there were a lot of people that were very concerned. So by bringing it back to committee at that point, mainly so that the two sides could meet and talk, a whole lot got accomplished, and that's how we got here today. Again, had Mr. Cook come with the second reading at the next meeting with no other discussion, and it was voted down because of concern by the neighbors, it would have been a whole year before he could move forward. So I'm just saying these things to say thank you very much for working together, and let's all remember that if this didn't pass tonight, what we end up with is a possibility for Mr. Cook to have a 40,000 square foot grocery store 15 feet behind residential homes with no buffer. Okay. So this is a lot of effort.
Thank you. All right, I think we're prepared to vote.
And this vote is just on the amendment.
Correct. It's on the amendment. So all in favor of the motion to approve the amendment, please signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Is that one no? Okay, the motion passes 8-1.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make...
Hold on.
Hang on a second.
Final reading orders number 1.
I'm sorry. So now we need a motion on the amended ordinance. That's correct.
I was going to make a motion for the approval of final reading on the amended motion, or the amended ordinance.
Second.
So we have a motion to approve, final reading of the amended ordinance. And we have a second. All right, discussion? Any input from the public? Yes, sir.
Honorable Mr. Mayor, may I ask Mr. Ulmer a question, please?
Please.
Mr. Ulmer, can you tell me what the heights will be on these commercial properties, sir? Does that taper out as the town goes up towards Allendale?
Do you have the height limit? Hold on. I had the entire PD printed out. I don't have it with me. Sorry. Do you remember what the height?
Perhaps the applicant knows.
No.
Does the applicant know what your building height limit is there?
He's got the document. He's joining my club.
While they're doing that, I would like to ask the residents, did y'all have any concerns about the height? Got it.
Me too.
But you're not voicing any objections to the height. Yes, sir. Mr. Canadian, you have the floor.
Yes, being that this isn't a proposal for a building, I would just like to let the neighbors know there's a single 3-person fire engine responding to Tupelo. So as we get higher, please join me in calling for increasing that protection in your area, which it could be tomorrow, it could be 5 years from now. I don't want to penalize Mr. Cook at this moment for it. I'll be voting for it, but please join me in urging that the fire protection come in line with the size of the town and its buildings. Thank you.
The height limit is 55 feet.
55 feet is the height limit there. Okay.
Is there a stories, Mr. Ulmer?
I think it just says the height.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have a motion to approve the final amended version of this PD. All in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed?
No.
The motion passes 8-1.
Final reading, ordinance number 18046, an ordinance providing for an amendment to the Pepper Track PD Plan Development District Ordinance, ordinance number 11048 is amended by amending the square footage limitations on buildings associated with specific uses as identified in Attachment E, permitted uses for RC, and I, zoning classifications.
Which brings us to the second item under B, old business, which is final reading of an ordinance to amend having to do with telecommunications towers. Mr. Ulma.
Move for final reading.
Nothing is.
What?
Move for final reading.
Second.
We have a motion to approve final reading. We have a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving final reading of the ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
I said no.
Huh? Did you say
no?
Oh, I'm sorry. 8-1.
Final reading, ordinance number 19001, an ordinance to amend Chapter 156 zoning code pertaining to telecommunications towers by adding a new section 156.121, regulating small wireless facilities.
That concludes planning. Thank you, Mr. Ulma. I appreciate that. This brings us to committee reports. We would ask, for the sake of efficiency and brevity, unless there's something really shocking or your committee requires an action by this council, please defer. Accommodations Tax Committee, no meeting. Bids and Purchases, no meeting. Economic Development Committee.
I will turn them into reports, sir.
Thank you very much. Education Committee.
Turned into Christine.
Thank you. Finance Committee, I believe we have some items.
Thank you, Mayor. We have two items for that need action. The first is a consideration of a funding request by Housing for All Mount Pleasant. The Finance Committee approved a recommendation for Council to consider funding up to $50,000 matching grant for Housing for All Mount Pleasant. I leave that in the form of a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. This was approved by your committee.
Yes, sir.
We heard from Housing for All earlier today. This would be a matching grant. They have to raise the money to get the money.
Sure.
And we have a motion and a second. It is open for discussion. I take it that the committee also addressed where these funds would come from. No?
It's up to council, sir. We have speakers.
Okay. We have speakers signed up to address this.
Chris Brooks.
Thank you very much. I'll be quick. I know it's late. Getting dragging on. You've had a long meeting. But we really do appreciate support from Town Council and from the Finance Committee. We're tackling something which is a difficult issue for Mount Pleasant. And we're tackling something which really other communities are doing through their own staffs. We're doing it with a volunteer board, a group over here, some of our board members and staff. And so we appreciate your time given to this. But really what we're looking at, and again, this is Chris Brooks, 766 Chatter Road in Walkendale. We lived here for 34 years, raised 3 kids. And our kids and their friends, very few of them, can actually afford to live here when you get right down to it. And that's a problem. I look across this council here. Your own kids may face that one day, or maybe doing it now. They just can't afford to live in the town you grew up in. And I think that's a real concern. But you look at affordable housing, the lack of what we have here in Mount Pleasant, because we have a lot of wonderful subdivisions, a lot of wonderful homes. But in the price range we're talking about, it eliminates whole groups of people. Seniors, for one. I spent several years at East Cooper Meals on Wheels, and we heard earlier from Stephanie, both Meals on Wheels and Echo are losing seniors. They're moving out of town because they can't afford to live here. Look at transportation. That's a very difficult issue in this town. We have 72% of our employees across the town coming and going every day. So that's why we have such difficult traffic. Employers also face the difficult situation of retaining, attracting, and having good staff. Not everybody works for Boeing, who will give you an incentive to find a home in an expensive part of the country. But looking at, particularly if we have a bridge closure, we all seen this in the last several years. If a bridge closes, if I came in here from Goose Creek or North Charleston, I'd think twice about doing that if the bridge was down for 4 or 5 days. So it's a situation where affordable housing needs to be addressed for those. Otherwise, we're affecting
you need to wrap up, Chris.
A whole generation that are being impacted by this, our young professionals and families who can't find a home in Mount Pleasant. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
Melissa Moore, do you want to speak again? Okay.
So I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I've already spoken telling you about our accomplishments, which I think are pretty substantial given our limited amount of time that we've been in existence. I would only ask that you would consider just giving us the $50,000 outright instead of making it a matching grant. It's going to be very difficult to raise that money, but we know that we can do it. We already have the support behind us. There's the will in this town to get done what we intend to get done. And we know that our mission is going to make this town a better place for people to live, learn, and earn, and it will help ease some of the traffic commuting issues that people have here. So please consider giving us the $50,000 outright, and I appreciate everything that you guys do. Thank you.
And the other speakers I had, Mayor, are no longer here.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I just want to address something that Mr. Brooks brought up just now about the town. This needs to be addressed, and just historically, for those who weren't here back some years ago in the other administration, we actually had land that was zoned for affordable housing at the end of Rifle Range Road, and the previous administration voted to upzone it to R4. Now we have $500,000 homes on that piece of property. Not everybody voted for that. Some of us wanted affordable housing, and that was the prime spot for it. So I just want to make sure, for the record, we have looked at it before, and we did try to do something. Unfortunately, we got set back by that vote, and now we're kind of back to square one, and we're working our way back up. So I just wanted to make sure that for those listening that weren't here at that time, they know the situation. We really did try, but unfortunately, we got shot down. But we're working back. Thanks.
Yes, Ms. Lanning.
So a couple things. One is in identifying where the money would come from. One of the questions we might ask, because we're having our budget committee meeting next month for the upcoming year, and so this request is coming in towards the latter.
That doesn't apply to you, sorry.
That's it.
That's it. Move on. This request is coming in the late part of the budget year. So I guess the first part of my question is, if we were going to do this, could we look at this in light of our new budget, since our meeting is next month? I mean, like, if we're doing this as a matching grant, especially, the funds aren't going to be, we're not writing a check next week, so that's one question. And then I guess the second one is, Melissa, you talked about the developers you're already talking to and things that are going. Is there anything you can tell us about that? And the reason I say that is, if you've got something like hot on the trail and it's going to take money to get that going, that could encourage folks to want to help get going.
Thank you. Mr. Canning.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank Mr. Santos for bringing that to our attention, which I think is a very appropriate thing to bring up a prior council vote to shed light on something we're discussing now. So thank you, sir, very much for bringing that up. And I'll be supporting this. Thank you.
Any others? Are we prepared to vote? All right. The motion is to approve a $50,000 matching grant for Housing for All Mount Pleasant. All in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, we'll go ahead and you're taking up first reading of the amended ordinance, the budget amendment tonight, and we'll amend the budget ordinance for final reading next month to include the $50,000.
Got it. All right. Next, you have the floor, Mr. O'Rourke, in your committee report.
Yes, sir. The second is a consideration of mid-year budget adjustments. The Finance Committee recommends approval of the FY 2019 budget amendment ordinance for the Town Council's consideration. Ms. Kartov explained it very well before in the public hearing, so I'll place that in the form of a motion.
Second.
I believe we have to take that up in its proper place, right, under council new business? Right. You can make that motion when we get there.
Oh, sorry.
Sounds good?
Yes, I'm done.
All right. Fire Committee, no meeting. Human Resources, no meeting. Patriots Point Development Authority, nothing major at the last meeting. There is a meeting scheduled for this Friday. Planning Committee, is there additional report?
I'll turn it into the clerk, but we are working as hard as we can, as fast as we can on the short-term rentals. and I'm sure Jeff's tired of hearing about it, but I think we're getting down to where we're close now.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I just wanted to say, Fire Committee did not meet this month, but each of you should have a copy of the monthly report from the Fire Department. Yes. Chief Mixon gives us that every month to give you a sense of the incidents and how they respond. So y'all should have a copy of that.
Thank you. Police, Judicial, and Legal, I will submit that in writing. Public Services, no meeting. Recreation Committee.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have two items. One we'll do under Council New Business, but the first one, the Recreation Committee recommends to Council approval of East Cooper Land Trust and Southern Paws Animal Rescue as the 2019 Blessing of the Feet beneficiaries. I'll make that in a motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve those two beneficiaries as the Blessing of the Fleet beneficiaries.
Yes, sir.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Next. Is there another one?
Well, no, mine's under New Business. Next one's under New Business. So.
Okay, got it. Transportation Committee report, a couple of things to report. Everyone saw that the county has eliminated Alternative 5A, that we were all getting so many emails about. $200,000 has been approved for, I believe, design. Is that right, Mr. DeMore? The design portion of what is referred to as the interim fix, which is another southbound lane that would go from Joe Rouse down to 17. And that can be finished within a year and a half. And, you know, they're not even going to start working on 41 for years. So that is underway. And then the committee voted to ask the county council how much authority the town of Mount Pleasant could be delegated to see this through. It is only a question. We will get an answer back from them and find out. The precedent being that the town is is the master of its own fate on Park West Boulevard, which we own. We know we don't own 41. The town was the master of its own fate on Hungry Neck Boulevard. We just want to find out, is there anything the town can do so that we are more of a master of our own fate on that? We will report back to this full body what that answer is.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. As the chair, we submitted basically a question to the county on that 41 issue, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then you had a press availability the next morning speaking about it. I was just wondering if anything happened between that question and the press availability where you were on the radio?
What I was on the radio was the interim lane.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Did not address the other question. Waterworks Commission report, nothing to report. Water Supply Committee, no meeting. Did we omit anything on committee reports? All right, Administrator's report.
Thank you, Mayor. Just announcing vacancies on the Old Village Historic District Commission, the Board of Zoning Appeals, and Culture, Arts, and Pride Commission. That's all.
Thank you. This brings us to item 11, council business. New business is now the first reading of the ordinance to amend the budget for the town of Mount Pleasant. Marcy?
Yes, sir. What you have before you is the amendment that we had the public hearing on. The expenditures are 2 firefighters that would be coupled with the 4 in the current budget to bring 6 that would allow for 4 per each of the existing ladder trucks. There's also, for transportation, a transit and residential permit study. There's FEMA reimbursement, and then there's the transfer out based on the fund balance policy to stormwater and transportation. Of the transportation funds, $200,000 would go towards the SC 41 design that you just spoke of, sir.
Thank you. Mr. O'Rourke, would you like to make the motion?
I would like to put the approval of the fiscal year 2019 mid-year budget adjustment in the form of a motion.
Second.
We have a motion, we have a second. Any discussion? Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask the fire chief a question, sir.
If it's apropos to this amendment, that's fine.
Chief, could you come up to the mic, sir? First, I'd like to thank you for making the 4 firefighters on each ladder, but I would also just ask for you to explain to the council the difference between a ladder truck and an engine, because there seems in the course of the conversation the last few days that people assumed every company was going to be brought up to 4, which you and I know is to be incorrect. So could you just explain the difference so everyone understands that we still have 3-unit engines throughout the town?
Okay, sure. So currently we have 6 engines throughout the town and 2 ladder trucks. So those ladder trucks, as Ms. Kotov mentioned, are brought up to 4 minimum staffing every day, with the 6 additional in this mid-year budget. Not to be simple, but the ladder trucks basically have the big ladder on top where we can reach elevated stories and things of that nature. They do forcible entry and a little bit different job than the engine company that does the firefighting. So 6 engines currently, 2 ladder trucks. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, the staffing on the engines again, sir? Just so.
They are staffed at 4. However, the minimum we allow is 3.
So in other words, typical day, we have 3 on every engine, correct, sir?
I mean, there are days where there'll be 2 or 3 engines that have 4, but there could be a day where none of the engines have 4 and they're staffed at 3. It depends on the staffing for the day, vacation and sick time and things of that nature.
So there is no fill-in when someone's on vacation or out sick if there's a 4th man that's not there, which is the norm?
Correct. The only time there's a fill-in is if we drop load.
So then in actual reality, our staffing is 3 on the engines, correct?
The minimum, yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. We have a motion on the floor to approve the amended budget. All in favor of the motion to approve, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously.
First reading, ordinance number 19007, an ordinance to amend the budget for the town of Mount Pleasant, South Carolina for the fiscal year commencing July 1st, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019.
Councilman Santos, I believe this is yours.
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion that the Recreation Committee recommended that we approval of the proposed changes to the Farmers Market Advisory Board bylaws. I'll put that in the form of a motion.
Second.
Have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion? I believe if there is that what you're here to address?
Yes, sir.
Farmers Market, if we have any questions. Any questions? All right. All in favor of the motion to approve, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Boy, that was easy.
Hey, this is recreation, man. we don't play.
Great.
We run and jump, but we don't play.
Resolution
We actually do play.
19021.
Yeah, no pun intended.
Okay,
right?
so items 4 and 5 have already been moved. There is no old business.
Should do 3.
Did I skip?
Number 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the sale. Ordinance authorizing the sale of an approximately 2/10 of an acre portion of property located on Walt Miller Street, town of Mount Pleasant.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Have a motion to approve. We have a second. Is there any discussion? Yes, sir.
Question.
Is it possible for us to speak on it?
You could, sure.
I'd like to yield to her if that's okay,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm unclear as to what the town is selling. And when land is for sale, Housing for All Mount Pleasant has a foot in the game. And so I would like to know, in sort of what it's for, what we're selling.
Sure, yes, ma'am. It's a small linear piece of land adjacent to property that we lease to the Armory.
That you lease to whom?
To the Armory, to the National Guard. Okay. And so this particular piece of land and the way it's shaped wouldn't be usable for any type of structures.
Yes, but at some point the Armory may be.
Well, that's not before us tonight. Thank you, Sal.
No, but I'm concerned that you not sell off pieces of property which may later be part of a larger part.
Thank you. Yes, sir, you have the floor.
Question for the administrator. Eric, does this relate to the old fire station that used to be there?
No, it's separated from
Okay, but it wasn't contiguous to it at one point, or that's a different place?
I can't recall, so it may touch in a corner, but it...
Is that how we came to have this land, that original fire station?
There has been talk that somewhere in our history, there was some connection to the old Fire Station 3, to the roadway behind. Yeah. I don't recall that. That's not to say it never existed, but this is... that's all I know about.
What's the what's the price of the land?
I believe that
The
it was
road.
50, what was it?
We're allowed to discuss that.
It's approximately.
48,000?
Yeah, 48,000.
Sounds like the perfect amount to hire another firefighter, being that there is a fire department DNA on that land, just saying. Conclude my remarks.
We have a motion to approve the sale. Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion to approve signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
First reading ordinance number 19008, an ordinance authorizing the sale of an approximately .2 acre portion of property located on Walt Miller Street, Town of Mount Pleasant.
Now that moves us to item B, old business. There is no council old business. Item C, executive session. If council so approves, we would move into executive session to discuss legal and contractual advice related to the potential acquisition of real property, to receive legal advice pertaining to the Park West Development Incorporated versus Town of Mount Pleasant. The second reason we would be in executive session would be personnel matters, considerations of applications for the Old Village Historic District Commission, and consideration of applications to the Board of Zoning Appeals. Is there a motion that we enter into executive session for these reasons stated? Yes.
Second.
We have a motion. We have a second. Yes, we have a comment.
Question for legal counsel. On the portion that begins with council may take action on any item, does that indicate that we can discuss any legal matter in this executive session?
The only matters that can be discussed in executive session are those listed on the agenda, announced by our chair and approved by council. And then, correspondingly, as required by our Supreme Court and their rules, we have to provide notice to the public that council may take action on any of the items that are properly voted, and we are in executive session to discuss.
Okay, because the way it words, I've noticed this for a long time, listed on an executive session agenda. Yeah. So I think we need to tweak that wording for the future, but thank you.
Okay.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second. Before we vote, let me read this. Council may take action on any item, including any subsection of any section listed on an executive session agenda or discussed in an executive session during a properly noticed meeting. We have a motion, we have a second to enter into executive session for the reasons previously stated. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? We are in executive session.
Think I'm kidding?
No.
No.
Absolutely not.
What's going on? You getting fused?
We're gonna miss you someday. Please stop coming. Is everybody here? All right, we have reconvened from executive session. No votes were taken, no action was taken, but there may be motions to arise resulting from information that was shared in executive session.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion.
Can you move to the microphone?
Yes, sir. I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Ms. Ann Dovry to seat number 1 and Mr. John Hackenberg to seat number 2 in the Old Village Historic District Commission.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of those 2 appointments to the Old Village Historic District Commission, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion passes. Next.
Mayor, I have a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we negotiate a contract for the purchase. We have legal staff negotiate a purchase for the contract for the purchase for the parcel of land discussed in executive session.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion as stated signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes.
Mayor, I've got a motion. I'd like to authorize legal staff to negotiate a settlement offer that was discussed in executive session.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Is there one more?
Yes, Mayor, I have a motion for the Board of Zoning Appeals. I would like to make a motion that we reappoint Mr. Bobby Carrier for the Board of Zoning Appeals.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the appointment of Mr. Bobby Carrier, reappointment to the Board of Zoning Appeals, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. The motion passes. There being no further business before us, this council is adjourned.
Seriously, we're adjourned?
Have fun.
You can stay. You have the
It's
floor.
my home away
You
from
have the
home.
floor.
I think you
No,
should
thank
check
you.
the-
You can have
the
it back.
volume on your Robert's rules.
You have the
It's the
floor.
wrong one.
I love your little parting shots. You're so cute.
It's in the ordinance.
You're so cute.